Guys, Winter and Qibli are so sweet. So, I've been rereading the second arc, and today I finished book 7. I've been wanting to rehash my thoughts on Winter, though they haven't really changed. I just like talking about him. But something else kind of stood out to me during my reread. The dynamic between Winter and Qibli. Now, as y'all know, Qibli is my favorite character in Wings of Fire. But honestly, Winter is closer and closer to the top every time I think about him. He's so engaging, and his story is so easy to get invested in. It's a story about a dragonette who doesn't measure up to his family's expectations, who tries so hard to be loved, only to realize eventually that nothing he did would ever be enough for his family, and that maybe that wasn't such a bad thing after all. But wait, am I talking about Winter or Qibli here? Because that literally describes them both. So it's no surprise that both of them are very close to being my favorite character. One thing I noticed this go around that I've never picked up on before is that Winter and Qibli have nearly identical childhoods. I guess what with parental issues being so prevalent in Wings of Fire, everyone has something going on, so it's never really stood out to me before. But they actually struggled with very similar issues growing up, and I think that's part of the reason they get each other so well. But Cyprus, you might be saying, they do not get each other so well. They get on each other's nerves all the time. And that's true in a way, and I'm going to talk about it. But I also think Winter and Qibli get each other, on a fundamental level. They both deal with this really deep-seated insecurity, caused, I think, in part by their culture, but mostly by their family. We see in Winter from a young age this natural empathy and sort of resistance to the Icewing idea of needing to be totally self-sufficient and strong alone. Early on in book 7, we got this flashback where he's out hunting, and he pauses when he notices the polar bear he's about to kill has cubs. Not only that, but when he sees the scavenger pausing in its own hunt for the same reason, he's stricken and impressed by the empathy from that creature too. So here we have the situation where Winter's social standing, his ease of life, could be dramatically improved by bringing in this polar bear. His parents are really pushing him to make this kill, and he's already feeling the weight of their disappointment on him after every failed hunt. But he hesitates. Like he says much later in his fight with Hailstorm, what is he fighting for? A rank on a wall? Social status? What is that even worth? Meanwhile, Qibli grows up in this family of assassins. Very cutthroat, very take care of number one first. And despite this, we see Qibli trying to be kind to his family. We got a flashback from him too. Qibli as a dragonette trying to offer his mother something he stole. And instead of accepting his gift like he'd hoped, she's furious with him for putting someone else before himself. Qibli's life could have been easier if he'd given in to that dogma, if he'd put his considerable intellect to use for himself, if he'd given up on other dragons. His life could have been a lot better, at least on the surface. In both cases, their families would have respected them at least, even if they never loved them. But we see that seed from a young age. Both of them are straining to be better, even though their families are holding them back. And it's so cool that even though they are literally polar opposites, they are struggling with the same issue. Their heart is telling them one thing, but their family is telling them the opposite. Because of this, they both deal with insecurity in their own ways. Winter grew up being told and shown over and over again that he was the failure. Icicle was the prodigy. Hailstorm was perfect. Winter was adequate at best, and a disaster at worst. And ever since Hailstorm's capture, something Winter had no direct control over, he'd been internalizing this idea that it was his fault. Not to mention, Hailstorm's parting words didn't help with that. Even though we know he was being cruel to Winter to get him to run away and save himself, Winter clearly never figures that out. He spends the next 2 years certain that his brother really thought he was weak, a failure, and unloved. That's rough. Winter's innermost thoughts seem to go against everything his culture and family teaches. So instead of wondering if those authority figures in his life could possibly be wrong, he believes that he is, and that because of that, he's unlovable. But then we have Qibli, who left his family much earlier and found better support figures much sooner, but still struggles with that same insecurity. That sting of rejection never fades, and Tui shows us this long before Book 10. There's a scene when they're in the rainforest hunting Icicle, when Moon tells Winter he's better on the inside than most dragons. On the one hand, we see Winter's immediate rejection of this idea. He doesn't believe that anyone who could read his mind and see his innermost self could truly believe in his own goodness. But then without missing a beat, Tui flips the script to Qibli, who butts in with a joke along the lines of, "But not better than me, right? I'm the best." And yes, I know this is a joke. I'm not trying to read super deep into a throwaway comment. But I do think it tells us something about Qibli as much as that scene is also about Winter. Qibli does wonder if he's good on the inside too. We see that in Book 6. He wonders if Moon sees good or evil in his quick mind once he knows what she can do. This charismatic joke invites reassurance. His lighthearted words are covering a very serious fear that he too is wrong on the inside, just like his family suggested. And here's another thing. I love how both of their coping mechanisms annoy the other at first, before later helping them. Winter deals with this insecurity and self-hatred through anger. Anger at himself, anger at other dragons, anger at other tribes. Qibli deals with his feelings of inadequacy through humor. He's constantly trying to lighten the mood in heavy situations, constantly working to be someone that everyone else wants to be around. And I think he does that because he has a subconscious fear of being left. That's why he's so adamant about going with Winter to find Hailstorm. It's not just about helping out a friend. It's about sticking with someone that he's decided is in his circle. And you know what? Qibli's jokes and apparently inappropriately timed humor drives Winter crazy. He thinks Qibli doesn't take anything seriously. He thinks Qibli's a doofus. But his own anger and impatience frustrates Qibli too. Qibli thinks Winter is stubborn and is constantly trying to persuade him out of his bad moods. We see it in the first scene with them in Book 6. Winter is furious with Moon, and he's frustrated with how lightly Qibli is handling the situation with his pet scavenger. Qibli's worried about how angry Winter is and prepared to fight him if he needs to, and trying to de-escalate the only way he knows how to, through humor. But as we progress through the arc, this starts to shift. Winter begins to recognize when Qibli is using humor to diffuse a situation, or to pick at someone he doesn't like. He notices how Qibli can be serious, how he uses his quick tongue as another weapon in his arsenal. During his diamond trial, we even see Winter imagining what wry remarks Qibli would be making about the hypocritical trial. Earlier in Book 7, when the girls run off to race each other, Qibli makes a point to stay behind to playfully tease Winter, pretending he's talking like nobility and poking fun at Winter's highbrow speech. He's constantly trying to draw Winter out of his shell, and in this case it worked, and our recalcitrant friend plays along, informing Qibli that he'd never say anything like higgledy-piggledy in his life. And in Book 10, when Qibli has to face his grandfather and his family, we see Winter standing up for him. Even slightly brainwashed by Darkstalker, he's not going to let Qibli face anything alone. He turns that cold anger and icy disdain on Qibli's family. Qibli is used to being the one playing defense. He's the dragon that stood up for Thorn, the dragon that stood up to more dangerous criminals, the dragon who stands up for Moon or Kinkajou or Ostrids or nervous students or even random strangers. I think it's cool that for once Qibli gets to have someone stand up for him. So, I just think they're neat, because they both annoy each other originally, but by the time they get to know each other, what once has been an issue between them becomes an expression of care between them. Winter tells us in Part 3 of Winter Turning, which is an excellent title by the way, that his entire life is about being an Icewing. It's always been about being the Queen's nephew, Narwhal and Tundra's son, the perfect prince. Trying to live up to those rigid Icewing standards even as his heart told him different. Qibli is trying to help his friend realize what Qibli himself learned a long time ago. Your family, your tribe, doesn't have to define you if they aren't you. Thorn earned Qibli's loyalty and love through her actions, by proving to him that she would treat him right and respect him, unlike his family. Qibli and the Jade Winglet are trying to do the same for Winter during Book 7. Show him that loyalty isn't deserved, it's earned. And they spend that book proving with their actions that they want to support and appreciate Winter if he'll have them. They all do it, but I just notice it coming from Qibli more than anyone else. And I think that's because more than anyone else, and thanks to his own backstory, he gets what Winter is going through. What do y'all think? Did you notice how Qibli is constantly looking out for Winter? Or how similar their backstories are without being repetitive or boring? I think their friendship is the coolest thing ever, and I love reading their banter. It's so fun. Comment below and tell me what you think. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to subscribe or check out my other videos. You can also go to the description to find links to my DeviantArt, Patreon, and store, where you can find more art and support me. Thanks so much for watching, and y'all have a blessed day.